Bag, I want the bag. Work my way from a garden to a track. Flip it from a track to a plot full of acres. Do it for the farmers and the producers and the makers. What we even here for? Occasionally I ask it. I know it's more than struggling, anticipating the casket. Reap what we sow, trying to fill up my basket. Life's a plantation, I self-law and master. Over the plot I've been granted on this planet. Now it's slanted, cause the chosen been supplanted. But if you overstand it, it was spoken. Fractured, but we ain't broken. Even though some would rather play the role of token, we growing. Black through the essence of a presence. We carry the blood of gods, we carry the mind of peasants. Rich black gardens, future look more like Eden. Multiply seeds like the seed banks in Sweden. Rep my planners on plan according to season. B1 code, switching it up is treason. Black power, family what we eat. Either we get fed or we feed. B1AG.
What is going on? What is growing on? What is growing on? Welcome back to B1AG. I'm John Henry Harris. We have Farmer Brian EMC. Here at B1AG, we focus on agricultural production, education, health, food, nutrition, marketing, economics, all for the black family and the black community. Like, share, share. Let's go ahead, be active, proactive, and let's move this algorithm so we can get this conversation to grow and more participation in our food system, food security, digitally, as well as out in the real world. Welcome back to B1AG. Today, where's the beef? Megadroughts forcing ranchers to decrease livestock. Now, the megadroughts out on the West Coast and the fires, they're having an indelible effect on our livestock production. We're talking about cows, lambs, sheep, even hogs. Now, the reasons these megadroughts are hurting livestock production is because basically all the greenery, the grazing that the cows need to feed is being affected. The limited water, same thing. They're having a hard time feeding as well as watering these livestock. The high temperatures are decreasing the health of the cows. And also because of the high temperatures, it is lowering the birth rate of the cows. All this negatively affects the amount of beef that will be available for us to eat. And it's also forcing ranchers to slaughter cows at an alarming rate. So a lot of this beef that we're being introduced to in our food supply is actually distressed meat. Meat that is not necessarily the healthiest from animals that are distressed from heat exhaustion. So we're going to look at this today, not only from a food production standpoint, but also we have to keep in mind that our governing bodies, the people that tend to look after us, is metaphorically and also literally, it's like we live on a farm. The lifestyle and also just the perception of the general population often correlates to that of livestock. So B1AG, here at B1AG, we tend to dive a little deeper and look beyond just food production, but also any implications it may have on the human population, because we are often looked at as livestock. Even here in America, in our Constitution, we were actually written in as 3/5 of a person and referred to as livestock. So there's an interesting correlation between, how people are perceived in general as well as livestock. So where's the beef? Megadroughts forcing ranchers to decrease livestock. Let's dive deep on this, Farmer Brown.
First, I just like to say peace to the B1 family. Hope everybody's doing well, vigilant. What's going on? Perfectly imperfect. So yeah, I remember doing my undergrad studies. I had a livestock production course. And this is one of the reasons we want the family to understand agriculture. You know, even if you don't necessarily want to get your prints in the mud and grow something, I think there are a lot of correlations, as Bruh said, that tie directly into human activity. And so I remember there was an activity, it was talking about goat surveillance. We were watching goats on a pasture, and there's technology. The goats had little pins in their ears. And so a scientist, you know, we're told to follow the scientist. The scientists were able to put these little pins on the goats' ears and follow their grazing patterns. So the goats didn't know these pins were on their ears. And so the purpose of it was, if I'm wanting to run a optimal goat operation, you know, what are their patterns? You know, obviously a farmer's not going to sit up 24 hours a day watching what the goats do. So this is technology when we talk about ag tech. But we were literally sitting in class looking at this PowerPoint. It was a video, and it was watching all of these little red dots move about on this pasture. You know, it was GPS, computer generated. And you could see these goats' migration pattern. And I remember in my head, I'm like, man, you know, if there's technology to watch goat grazing pattern, I can only imagine humans as I sat looking at my phone. But not to digress too far away from our topic today. So absolutely, when we talk about trying to get our young people and even some of the older people involved in agriculture, animal science, plant science, we got to have people at the table who's not only making these decisions, but offering solutions. Because here at B1AG, we want to talk about solutions. And so we're going to give a free class today. This will actually be useful for anybody considering getting into livestock production. So when we're talking about this situation going on in the West Coast, the scientific concept of, okay, I have my animals on this space growing is carrying capacity. Carrying capacity of an environment is the maximum population size of a biological species that can be sustained by a specific environment, given the food, habitat, water, and other natural resources. Meaning, if I'm gonna have some cows, goats, sheep on my land, I want to make sure there's enough forage for them. Forage being grass. When we think about goats, okay, goats can chew off of trees as well. And so these are things you want to keep in mind if you're wanting to get into, raising some animals. And so to give you some very specific numbers, and so in America, the average 1.8 cows per acre. Based on this count, about 8 to 10 cows can be raised on 5 acres. Typical stocking densities in productive grass can be approximately 6 to 8 sheep or goat. Meaning on 1 acre, I can have about 6 to 8 goats. On 1 acre, you know, optimally, if you're just dealing with natural feed, you know, the grass that's available, you only want about 1.8 cows. Saying that to say, obviously, if you've ridden along the interstate, you'll see a lot more of these animals, you know, kind of condensed on smaller areas. And so what does that mean? We think about feed. We're going to get into the human implications of this later, but we're being technical right now. So to make up for what you don't have in your pasture as far as grass, a farmer's going to invest in feed. And we also know because of, last year's events, a lot of supply chain has been disrupted. A lot of the corn that you see when you're riding along the interstate on these vast farmlands, a lot of this corn is for feed. I don't have that specific number in front of me, but a vast majority of the corn grown in North America is either for feed or biofuel. And meaning it's not necessarily for human consumption. It's to supplement the dietary needs of the livestock that eat this feed. So once again, if I don't have enough land or grass to feed my livestock, I have to supplement that with feed. This feed cost. You have to have troughs to hold this feed. You have to have storage units. And so once again, when we think about when we talk about the subsidies that a lot of time the melanated farmers don't have to work with, all of these are the things that are necessary to run an optimal livestock operation. Not to digress too far away from the topic today, as far as the Megadroughts and ranchers, we realized that 40% of the actual successful melanated farmers in our community are raising livestock, meaning this is a cutthroat game. It's only so many areas a lot of people are going to make money. So livestock has, up to this point, when we're thinking about the melanated farmers in the Southeast, Midwest, they've been able to make money with livestock. When we talk about the UN 2030 initiatives, you know, we're going to start hearing more and more about these climate crisis that we're in. so to speak. We're going to see a lot more about carbon reduction. All of this directly ties to livestock. There's a lot of implications to this, family, but if we won't go into the story from the West Coast, and then we'll go a little deeper into how these things connect with what we see going on now.
Now, going out west, the biggest problem that we're seeing is that the livestock, they're actually being slaughtered at alarming rates, and this is due to extreme exhaustion, and this comes from the heat. Now, according to Slate.com, they did a story about the livestock problem that they're having. And they said between June 2020 and June 2021, Texas reported that it had slaughtered or culled an additional 38.2 million pounds of red meat livestock, an annual growth of around 30% for that figure. Now, what's worse is that 36.4 million of those 38.2 pounds of red meat were produced between May and June, a single summer month, accounting for more than 95% of its increase in a year. So 95% of that increase happened in 1 month. That's a lot of, that's an overwhelming number of livestock that had to be slaughtered. Now, what are some of the reasons for this slaughter? Now, according to Leanne Hunting, and she is an animal industry director at the Utah Department of Agriculture and Food, she states the heat and lack of moisture or rainfall leads to a lack of feed and water, which can make it hard to keep the cattle healthy. Cattle ranchers have been hauling water to areas where natural water resources have been dried up and have been feeding hay to make up for the lack of forage. Without that water, heat exposure and exhaustion can cause a lot of harm to the cattle. Now, what we know is that the average feeder cattle, ideally, they survive and are healthy at around 25 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. At temperatures between 80 and 100 degrees, they begin to undergo rapid exhaustion, and at temperatures above 100, they will die. The average daily high in Phoenix, Arizona this summer was at around 105 degrees, and the year-over-year rainfall plummeting from 8 to 12 inches down to 4.41 inches is the lowest on record in over 10 years. So what we're seeing is that this heat is making these cattle unhealthy. And the ranchers have literally had to make the decision. Do I feed these cattle? Do I continue to bring them water, which is unsustainable? Some people have even transported their cattle to other more favorable climates. But again, this is unsustainable, and it costs bread. It costs that money. So they just decide to kill the animals. We got to kill them rather than feed them or make sure they're watered to keep them healthy. We're going to have to kill them. Now, does this food? My question is, does this just killed off meat? It's hard for me to believe that it's going to kill it and just bury it or burn it. I'm pretty sure it makes its way into the food system. Don't quote me on that, but it's just hard for me to believe that they're going to kill off all of these animals and not try to make something off of them. But again, just making a judgment call for a rancher. If they can't afford to feed it or give it water, they kill it off. And these are a lot of the same decisions that, our governments are facing. And we need to keep that in mind.
If you could pull up that infographic. We've heard this word herd immunity over the last year or so, in relation to viruses. But I guess my question, general or rhetorical question, can herd immunity be achieved in a hostile environment? When we think about overgrazing, we were talking about the UN the other day and some of the initiatives. They realized, okay, all this money we've been putting into farms has been going into these large farms. And we see there's a direct correlation with this negative climate impact. With a lot of these farms, there's this concept of overgrazing, as bruh's pulling up this infographic.
Which infographic, Brown?
Thomas Malthus, the Malthusian theory, the PDF. And so overgrazing animals can reduce plant leaf areas, decrease plants' ability to intercept sunlight. You know, everything needs sun, and grow new leaf material. This reduction in turn slows down plant regrowth, drains energy resources, and if left unchecked, can lead to eventual plant death. So another, you know, I keep reverting back to my undergrad days. There's a concept called Malthusian theory. I know a lot of people on here may have heard about this, but so Thomas Malthus, he was an 18th century British philosopher and economist that basically the concept is they felt like the earth wasn't going to produce enough food to feed a growing population. And those of us that believe in the Most High, we know the Most High doesn't make mistakes. You know, this is a sustainable planet. I remember in its natural state. I remember the elder Amos Wilson said, it's not that this planet doesn't produce enough food, it's that there's small amounts of people that's eating too much. And so you can apply that to food, you can apply that to economics. But saying that to say, Thomas Malthus, and like I said, this is the 18th century, was one of the main people leading this thought. And so not only has this impacted livestock in positive ways, you know, you don't want to be a unsustainable producer. You want to make sure I have enough land, I have enough resources, energy to feed my livestock so I can provide a good product to the consumer. But I think we would all be remiss and lightweight. One of my people's called me delusional. We'll be delusional not to think that this mindset has kind of bled into our politics. As bruh said, in the Constitution, at a point we were referred to as 3/5 of a human being. But the theory states that food production will not be able to keep up with the growth in human population, resulting in disease, famine, war, and calamity. You can go to the next slide. Actually, the slide after that. And so this concept of population growth, a population at carrying capacity, similar to livestock, is neither growing nor shrinking. When the numbers of individuals in a population of animals, plants, or humans exceed their carrying capacity, ability for the field, ability for your city state, ability for the stores around you, when that exceeds their carrying capacity, deaths outnumber births, meaning there's more people dying, more individuals dying than being born. As the population drops below carrying capacity, the ability of the city state to feed the people, the birth rate grows until births outnumber death. Go to the next slide. This is according to ecofuture.org. And I hope the family's reading between the lines of what we're saying. All of this is going to tie together. The Earth's limited supply of natural resources will only be able to sustain 2 billion humans by 2100. Bad news for a world that already feeds 5.9 billion, and this was in 2004. We're about 7.6 billion now. The optimum, this makes me think of the Georgia Guidestones. The optimum human population or carrying capacity for the U.S. is projected to be 200 million, which is millions fewer than the current population. And so right now, and I'm not a mathematician, but we know basic math. So right now we have between 360 390 million North Americans. Depending on where you get your statistics, we tend to lean towards the census. It could be right, it could be wrong, but there's somewhere between 330, 390 million North Americans. According to ecofuture.org, the optimal number for sustainability in North America will be 200 million, right? And so we've heard this word, especially the agriculturalists, the livestock producers understand this concept of cull a herd. Why would you cull the herd? It's literally to separate or remove, usually kill, as we're talking about the livestock in the West Coast due to drought, inferior animals out of a herd as to reduce the numbers or remove undesirable traits from the group as a whole. Undesirable traits, once again, I want to be the greatest livestock producer the world has ever seen. So I don't want these lanky cows. When we think about animal science, and so there's scientists now that, okay, we're going to take genes from cows that can resist a little hotter climate, and we're going to artificially inseminate this in the heifer to make sure we got a cow that we got some Angus, we got some Charolais that can withstand this heat. If I'm in a farmer where there's an area where it's too hot, I want these desirable traits. And so just like you're able to select genes and infuse that in the animal to get, an optimal product, when we think about the Malthusian theory, there are those that do make decisions in the society we live that have a concept of what are desirable and undesirable traits. If we can go to the next slide. Not to digress away, because all of this is on the same topic. When we think about Margaret Sanger, this is one of what we call a eugenicist. This is one of the founders of Planned Parenthood. This is in recent, this is within the recent, last 150 years that there were a significant number of people in North America that were influenced in politics and economics that felt like melanated people were an undesirable class. To my African brother, Al-Keebalon, to my brother, absolutely. To the brothers and sisters across the diaspora, because this doesn't mean everybody you come across looks at you like a cow or livestock. Here at this B1AG conversation, we're looking at the producers. We're looking at who's funding this farm, the American farm, so to speak. There's some people that see us as undesirable. Either I'm lying or I'm telling the truth. But I would encourage the family to look into the history of Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, the concept of undesirables, the concept of useless eaters. And so staying on code, we're told to follow the science. We're told to follow the science. And so in this concept of culling a herd, this comes directly from the NIH, nih.gov. I hate to read too much, but family, we got to do this. And if you want these infographics for yourself to look over, email us at B1AG at hiphop@gmail.com. Traditional measures, and I want the family to really listen to what I'm saying as I'm reading this. This isn't me making this up. This is the NIH.gov. Traditional measures to control animal-borne infectious diseases. Bats are animals. Infectious diseases includes restrictions on movement of people and potentially infected animals, strategies to limit interactions between humans, domestic animals, and potentially affected wildlife. And the vaccination or treatment I'm getting my words wrong. And the vaccination or treatment of any or all three of these populations. At times of heightened infections risk, livestock and wildlife are often culled as a means of restricting their movement and limiting their interactions with other animals and humans. Indeed, culling or stamping out remains a major strategy used to control emergent diseases in animal population. The aim of culling is to eradicate a host species, to prevent the pathogen entering and contaminating new individuals and populations. It's believed that culling eliminates or reduces the size of reservoir populations, either halting or decreasing the frequency of pathogen transmission to new hosts. However, and I ain't going to read this whole thing to you. However, evidence as to the epidemiological efficacy and cost effectiveness of culling as a sustainable solution to many zoonotic and epizootic remains inconclusive. And I want us to go to this the slide after the one. Go to slide 7. I want to put this in perspective, family. As the elder Nellie Fuller says, victims of what we'll call white supremacy, VGQ, victims guaranteed qualifications. We're able, as inhabitants on this farm, we're able to at least give our take. But in this, we're just quoting from the horse's mouth. And so we want to be codified. We want to learn from the farmers, right? We want to know, how do we get the best optimal operation? So according to one of the largest farmland owners in North America, Bill Gates, who owns 240,000 acres of prime farmland, in his TED Talk, like I said, and the brother Ben X eloquently, broke this down on one of his podcasts. And so Bill Gates in his TED Talks, Innovating to Zero, this is February 26, 2010. This is available. At the 3-minute and 51-second mark, and we're quoting, this equation has 4 factors. And the concept of this discussion was, okay, how do we reduce carbon emissions? We want there to be a healthier planet. We want to help all the poor people on this planet to live better lives. This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So if you got a thing on the left, CO2 that you want to get to 0, and that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person is using on average, the energy, our electricity on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near 0. One of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near 0. 4-minute, 22-second mark. Laughter. At 4-minute and 23-second. That's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. I'm just quoting. I'm still learning. At the 4-minute, 27-second mark, first we've got a population. The world today has 6.8 billion people, and he gave this speech in 2010. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, health care, reproductive health services, we could lower that perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3%. I'm going to let that sink in. I want to keep you healthy. And, like I said, we encourage you to reach out to us at B1AG at hiphopgmail.com. We'd be glad to send you this infographic. Like I said, here we don't like to deal in conjecture. But when we think about this farm that we're on in North America, and this is as of the most recent census, nearly all groups saw population gains this decade and an increase in the 2 or more racist population, referred to, throughout as multiracial, especially large, 276%. What we call the white population alone declined by 8.6% since 2010. We're not here to accuse anybody of anything. We're not here to imply anything. But you put yourself in the mindset of somebody who controls the narrative, in the mindset of I control the economics, I control the feed that these livestock eat. Now I see my population declining. Now, is my best interest going to be making sure that the populations that are having more children than dying, am I going to make sure that they're flourishing past me, or am I going to make sure I'm still here and I can influence the feed distribution to my livestock? At a time in what we call North America, and this is 1788, we were counted as 3/5 of a free individual for the purpose of determining congressional representation. Some constitutional, absolutely, some constitutional specialists will say, well, no, that got repealed in 1868. The United States Constitution 3/5 compromise is part of Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of law. How did that work for the family last summer watching people get snuffed out on camera? When we talk about the black farmers that the government came out and said, yeah, we've been shorting y'all for the last few decades. When we think about this due process of law, family, we're not here to, once again, we're not here to guess. We're not here to preach doom and gloom. Actually, you know, I'm a proponent of Vicky Dillard's concept. We're in our finest hour. We also know 2020 was the year of clarity, you know, putting things on the table. There is a power in truth. If we have one faction that's told us, I don't know how old the Georgia Guidestones are, that, hey, we have an objective of minimizing the population. We have righteous purposes. We want this to be a sustainable planet. Uh, are you in position to ask now, are you willing to eat less so more people can eat more? I think these are some questions to ask. I know we got on this conversation about livestock in the West Coast, but like I said, and like Bruh said, there are so many correlations with human activity on this planet. Do we have the carrying capacity? I'm a believer that the Most High doesn't make mistakes. The Most High doesn't make mistakes. It doesn't be like, oh, well, I did this, I created this perfectly, but oh, I didn't think this out. I mean, I designed these people to be resilient in any climate. I gave these people immune systems to be able to, any climate there exists in, they'll be able to survive. And I'm going to give you a little bit of, I'm going to inject you with a little bit of whatever pathogens, viruses, bacteria exist in whatever climate you are around the world, in caves, in flourishing tropical forests. And I made you specifically to be in this area. Now, when you take it upon yourself to go somewhere else, you get how you live. But then when you decide, okay, I got a better way to operate this thing than what the Most High did, that sounds to me like the story of the son of the morning. You know, so I know some of those groups understand. Lucifer, I can do better than you. You messed up, and so let me show you. Once again, we're not digressing away from the conversation, but there we greatly encourage you to look into livestock production. There's a lot of lessons to be gleaned theoretically, spiritually, and practically if you're wanting to get into growing meat. We see that market is being drastically impacted because most of us that eat meat are dependent on these large-scale farms. The word of the future, if you don't take away nothing else that we were talking about today, is small scale and localized. What are we doing to master local food systems? Local food systems mean, okay, our ability to eat within our area, our community isn't dependent on something that has to be produced hundreds, thousands of miles away from where I'm at. Do I have enough people around me, like-minded individuals that agree to, yeah, we would like our food to have less shipping time. We would like to have our eyes on what's going into our food, what is going into the soil that's growing our plants and vegetables and fruits, what is being fed to the livestock for people to still eat meat, what is being fed to the fish. And, you know, at the end of the day, we have many choices. The news, the media will consistently remind us, oh, you have to do this. Oh, you have no choice. There's no other choice. But when you turn it off and you look at the beautiful sky around us, you realize like there's nothing but air and opportunity. And so it's to the degree that we can really get codified on how can we feed ourselves. And just, you know, getting on that journey down that path, it opens up so many other portals to this liberation that we speak of, to this powerful nation that we speak of as a melanated family.
I also would just like to add that this issue with the livestock production, it's been an issue for a while. And a lot of it is driven by, you know, not just the climatic changes that we're going through in the world, but just excessive consumer demand. So again, you know, just like Farmer Brown said, small scale and localized, that equals food security. You know, being able to producing more food in closer proximity to the people, where you don't have to go, where the food production doesn't have to be shipped across the planet or across the country, where you can literally walk across your neighborhood and grab some food that was fresh produce, that was locally grown. We need to get back to small scale and localized. Think about it, 80% of our food comes from where? China?
80, more than 80%. I'm being conservative. Of our seafood comes from China. And I would say closer to more than 60% of the meat we consume comes from overseas.
That's a lot of gas. These emissions they're talking about, I think that gas and the emissions produced by these trains, planes, and automobiles and boats contributes more to global warming than cow farts. You know, we kind of got to get like back to a common sense, just practical approach to living. You know, one of the greatest shows for me growing up when I watched was some of y'all may not know it, but Google it if you don't. Was Little House on the Prairie. You know, that was basically teaching you how to homestead, how to produce your own, build your own house on your own land, grow your own food, you know, take care of yourself, being self-sustainable. The family itself is a business. The family itself is a corporation. The family itself produces for itself. You know, that's basically how I grew up living for the most part, you know, my grandfather being a farmer and also just a handy guy. You know, most of the things that was provided for us came through his hands. And, you know, and it definitely made a long lasting effect on me as far as the way I see the world and the way how I see how we can be. Now, the story about the West Coast, there's two words that we need to be familiar with, I think, is carrying capacity. We got to understand that these resources that are on this earth that that are available to all of us, they are natural resources. So they are in limited capacity. We can actually use them all up. And we are approaching, you know, beyond the tipping point for a lot of these natural resources. And also another is culling, the action of sending an inferior or surplus farm animal to be slaughtered. This is a concept that we use on our animals. But again, the way a lot of our leaders look at us is very metaphorically similar to the farm. And just to be on the safe side, being practical and, you know, forward thinking, let's increase our own food production so we can sustain ourselves to make sure that we aren't cold in the process.
I gotta, you said carrying capacity, we can use these resources up. You said you're incorporating us, and are we making these decisions, family? This is why we got to get ours into these fields of study. We should not look at this as abstract. We should not look at these dynamics as something that another group does. Like I said, nobody's going to come and stop you from deciding that you care about feeding not only yourself, but your community. Our ancestors, guess what? They ran all of this for hundreds of thousands of years, no problem. There was no need to cull the population because everybody understand to work sustainably. That was indelibly written into our genetic code as we're in this world of genetic modification and gene therapies. Absolutely, FLG TV, don't let nothing stop us from getting black to the garden. I was listening to some sisters the other day on Black Farmers Nationwide, which is a great group in Black-owned farms on Facebook. If you're on there, farming and garden is very different. And so here at B1AG, even when you go to our healthyblackfood.com, we want to be very specific in if you're really looking at having a successful farm enterprise, you have to understand from the seed what this entails. What does this entail? So this is the wisdom behind starting a garden first. I've seen a lot of unsuccessful stories of people, okay, I just happen to have some land and I happen to have a little money and an idea and jumping straight into the farming, and it becomes a mess because with farming, it's not a business where you can guess your way through it. And any long-term multi-generational farmer will let you know. You know, our family lost thousands of dollars because we didn't think this out 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ahead. And so this is why it's important to really understand from a rudimentary level starting a garden. This can start with a seed with your toddler, with your infant, with your teenager, and working your way up to a garden. And as you understand it, because everybody's understanding is going to be different. See, in the melanated community, we understand we learn different than other people. I mean, you can write things on paper and give me a degree and say I'm officially educated, or there's just an experiential learning from those that already understand these processes. Trial and error is cool, but we're in a time and space now, family, where we really got to show and prove where our passion is, where our intent is. And what I can tell you just from my personal journey, I don't speak for any organization, but Farmer Brown MC, once you decide that I want to know this, I want to learn this, and not just know it and learn it, I want to apply this to make my community better. I want to make my community competitive. Once you go in that direction, it's like little leprechauns. It's like a magical little video game. All of this help, all of this information, all of these resources become available. But each of us have to individually decide that this is something I want to do. Not to exploit anybody, not to just get a bag, at the expense of somebody. And there are many bags in agriculture. It's a $1 trillion a year business just in North America. But if we can understand what is it our ancestors understood that we like to romanticize and praise, make some ancestral noise. They understand that we got to feed the people. We got to feed the people. And then what we have an excess of after we fed our own, we can do commerce. We can travel around the world. We can travel up and down the Great River, the Mississippi River, Turtle Island, and we can feed other people for some form of wealth that you've obtained or extracted from the land where you're at. This is basic commerce, family. We see that doing this. We see that the economic structure as it is literally designed to keep certain livestock, out away from the trough. I'm gonna leave y'all darker ones. Because since I, thinking about Angus, not to digress, Angus, the black cows are have the dominant genes, if that means anything to the family. But I'm going to keep y'all over here, and I'm going to make sure I got all of the grass, the green, healthy grass over here where I'm at. And y'all are just kind of limited to my feed. And now in 2021, we realize, we really ain't got enough feed for all of these cows over here on this side that keep breeding. Let me go over to Africa and help them with their breeding problem. Let me take what I've learned in Africa for the last 50 years and take it over here to now Turtle Island with this breeding problem. Family, we're in our finest hour. I don't think there's anything to be left to guess right now. We understand what it is, and we have every opportunity in the world right now to do something about it. Getting black to the garden, getting our youth involved in producing life.
Producing life. That's what we stand on here at B1AG. Getting black to the garden, planting, growing. That is producing life. That is the nurturing of life. And there's no greater knowledge that one can gain as opposed to producing and nurturing life. That's about the most human things that we can do. Produce and nurture life and each other. Now, this conversation is dug deep, but I hope that y'all were with us today. Where's the beef? Megadroughts forcing ranchers to decrease livestock. Talked about carrying capacity, culling. These are concepts. These are agricultural concepts, but these concepts often intersect in our lives as well, and we need to be aware. Because again, we're trying to produce and nurture life and living. If you have any questions, any comments, if you'd like to see any of these, you'd like a copy of any of these infographics or information that we presented today, email us at b1aghiphop@gmail.com. Hit us up. We're very responsive. Again, we want to be not just a presenter or of content, but we want to be a conduit of information and knowledge. If you have some knowledge for us, give it to us and we'll share that as well. This is a two-way street because we all want to grow and we all have to eat. So Farmer Brown, this is a great talk today, man. I hope the family got something out of it. I hope y'all understood what was said today. And at the end of the day, if you really, really want to know something, what does the family need to do, Farmer Brown?
If you really want to know something, let's cultivate this spiritual, this physical herd immunity. Get our prints in the mud and let's learn how to grow something.
There it is. B1AG family. To the beginning of the week, let's fight through it. Let's fight through it. Let's grow harder. Let's grow harder. Let's continue to grow. Let's continue to grow. Never stop growing. Never stop growing. Until next time, it's B1AG Daily Bread Podcast. See you soon.